Hey, it's Dylan here from Schalke, and today we're talking a bit about the group stage at Worlds. Group 1, I think, before play-ins was one of the more obvious groups, or groups where you have clear, strong teams, like G2, for example, really good team. Suning Gaming, I think, quite good as well. I think TL getting drawn into that group after playing pretty good in play-ins makes it a bit more spicy, but I still think if I had to predict, I'd just go with the obvious of G2 and Suning out, 1 and 2 seed. G2 this year still won, split 2 times in a row, still went World Finals last year. I think probably a bit weaker than coming into Worlds last year. They looked a bit shakier like this year overall, but I'd imagine they're still a strong team and would do well. I could see TL making some upsets. They have a lot of really experienced players, especially internationally. Players like Broxa play really well. But I'd have to consider them kind of like the underdogs against like some of the more, I guess, teams with I think it's just a bit more talent. If I had to guess who would make it out of this group, I would say G2 and Suning Gaming. Yeah, Group 2, this is definitely, to me, like the group of death. I personally think Damwon are the strongest team going into this tournament. There is obviously like the pressure question, because I think last year, from talking to players and teams, Damwon looked like the best team actually behind the scenes at last year's World Championships. They'd be the favorites to me to make it out of this group in first place. But obviously JDG is super, super good as well, like one of the top teams from China, really, really strong. Just as easily could be them. I think it's a bit unlucky for Rogue. I think in some of these other groups, I think they could have done quite well and had a really good shot at making it out, but this has to be one of the hardest groups for sure. The crazy stuff always happens every single year. I think Rogue definitely has the talent to be able to take games in this group, but I have to put them as underdogs for sure to Damwon and JDG. I think Group C has to be the hardest group to predict of the 4 groups. Obviously, like TSM, they almost get eliminated in NA playoffs. But they end up winning the whole thing, right? They were lost to like one of the early best of 5s, and every single series went down to like Game 5 nail biter and was like really crazy. Fnatic, through most of summer split, was playing really bad, and then in playoffs they played super, super good, and then in finals, I don't know, they didn't have the greatest day. So another really hit and miss team. So I have a really hard time. Like I couldn't blame anyone, I think, for putting almost any combination of teams in this group. Like Gen.G obviously a threat as well, a lot of very good players on this team. So this one is really hard for me. If I had to predict, I guess I'd say Fnatic and Gen.G, just go with the obvious ones, the EU and Korea teams. But I really could see anything happening in this group. I think Group D for me is probably like the least interesting group. I think DragonX and Top Esports have to be like pretty big favorites going into this match. Very strong teams from Korea and China. Maybe there's an off chance that UOL or FlyQuest could make upsets. I think these teams have players capable of doing it. Russian teams are always very inventive. They're very aggressive. They played really good in the play-ins as well. And FlyQuest has players like Ignar, who has already in like Power of Evil, they already did their Worlds upsets like a few years ago, right? Like they have it in them. I would love to see Ignar Thresh popping off or something, or Ignar Blitzcrank, something like this in one of the games, making an upset to make it out. It would bring me some flashbacks to 2017 Worlds, and it would be nice to see. But I have to imagine that they're underdogs, right? So I'd imagine like just Top Esports have to be the favorite, like as one of the best Chinese teams, and yeah, DragonX as well. So these are the teams I see making it out of the group stage. Obviously like a pretty big bias towards the Chinese and Korean teams for me this year. I just feel from watching that talent-wise, they just seem a bit more together. But as always, like the group stage is always crazy. I could see a lot of upsets happening, especially in groups like Group C. As for tournament favorites, I think Damwon and Top Esports have to be my favorites to win the tournament right now. I think Damwon has probably the most talent, but it's more of a performance issue for them. Whereas I think the top 2 Chinese teams have to be just, they have performed and won Worlds the last 2 years, so you have to put them in as well. G2, as always, could pull off for sure, but I'd put them like a little bit below right now. One thing I'm really looking at for this World Group stage is the success or not success of a lot of these carry jungle champions. A lot of the strong Korean and Chinese junglers are very good Graves and Nidalee and I guess Lilia, although it's often banned, players. So I'm really interested to see how they pull these champions off, because they were a lot less played in the West. And the West had a lot more ganking junglers like Lee Sin. I know Selfmade, for example, has his Evelyn, which would be crazy to see again. Whereas these Chinese junglers are playing a lot of these more farm carry junglers. So I'm interested to see, at least for me, how the Western teams, if they pick up and copy, because they're scrimming these teams and it looks strong, or if they stick to what they have and there's a clash of styles. So that's one meta thing that's interesting me for sure. All right, thanks for watching for my group stage analysis, and can't wait to see the games.